Good evening, this is Atmospheric Alex here, and welcome back to another tropical weather outlook and discussion today for August 16th, 2025. We're going to be taking a look at Major Hurricane Erin. Yes, you see over here by the thumbnail, it was a Category 5 hurricane today. It just recently weakened to a Category 4, but nonetheless, we could see a secondary peak as it heads off to the northwest. And we're going to start off by taking a detailed look at your satellite imagery throughout the entire day today. You could see Erin explosively intensifying into a Category 5 hurricane this afternoon, and then slowly but surely weakening as a supposed eyewall replacement cycle could be ongoing with the system. And now we're going to go ahead and take a look at weather-wise here. This is your National Hurricane Center's cone of uncertainty for Erin. We're going to go ahead and scroll on down to where Erin is on radar. You can see a well-defined eye right here, and that is going to be something to really watch for, right? Where we see our eye. And this storm has actually been tracking consistently to the south of the cone today. Now, just recently, they did do a bit of an update, which is not a Category 5, so this software is wrong, but it has updated to its official track, or its official placement right now. But could we see us continue off to the west-northwest like this and kind of get outside of the cone once again? We'll have to wait and see, and this could cause significant westward track deviations later down the road. I'm talking about you all in the Turks and Caicos, the Bahamas, and the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And we're going to go ahead and show the cone. It does stay very far away from the Turks and Caicos Islands, but I do expect this to get a little bit closer, possibly. Not by too much more, but we definitely could see a bit of a deviation back west here. And then as we go further on up to the north and east, this does safely pass the Outer Banks, but again, it does get a little bit close in retrospect, so some very high surf is likely in those areas. And then Bermuda, still need to watch out. You're almost under that cone. I'd argue we would rely more on the western edge of the cone than the eastern edge at this time. And now we're going to go ahead and read through our key messages here from the National Hurricane Center. So I want you all to pay attention very closely here. We're talking about heavy rainfall at times through Sunday across the northern Leeward Islands, the Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico may lead to locally considerable flash and urban flooding along with landslides or mudslides because of how closely Erin is going to track to those areas. Like right down here, you can see it with your rainfall map. Up to 4 to 6 inches are going to be possible in Puerto Rico there. And then you see tropical storm conditions are possible in the Turks and Caicos Islands during the next 48 hours. They have a tropical storm watch, and you could see gusts even higher than that, and rain bands are expected to impact those areas. The Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico through Sunday could experience tropical storm force wind gusts, which we are already seeing, and also the southeast Bahamas as well. And Erin is expected to produce life-threatening surf and rip currents along the beaches of the Bahamas, much of the east coast of the U.S., and Atlantic Canada next week. Please do not go swimming out in the ocean. It's going to be very dangerous, and you could get pulled out to sea in a deadly fashion. So please stay away from the water. Interest in Bermuda should continue to monitor the progress of Erin, since there's a risk of strong winds, heavy rainfall, and high surf by the middle part of next week. That's another thing we need to talk about. And if you're wondering why Erin explosively intensified today, it's because of our sea surface temperatures. Look at where it is right now. And these waters don't seem warm, right? 29 Celsius, that's mid-80s, but still, that is warm enough to support rapid to explosive intensification, especially since there was no wind shear and no dry air issues, so it took full advantage of this and exploded. Now, another interesting thing is we currently have aircraft reconnaissance, our hurricane hunters in our storm right now. You can see how they departed out of, I believe that's the Virgin Islands, and kind of went in this fashion, hit the southern extent of your storm here, your southern eye wall, and your eye recorded a pressure down to 935 millibars. It was actually down to 915 earlier, so one could argue this has been rapidly weakening throughout the evening, and that is some fantastic news, but still a Category 4 hurricane is nothing to mess around with. They then sampled the northwest side of the eye wall, and now they're going right back down to the south, and they're likely going to take a pass like this, coming on up into the southwestern eye wall, into the northeastern eye wall. So that's going to be something to watch out for here on tropicaltidbits.com. And you could see their full detailed paths on these graphics here. Take a look at this, your flight level winds right here and your surface winds right here. We were talking about surface winds upwards of 125 knots, which does suggest 145 to 150 mile an hour wind, so a category 4 hurricane. And there's even been signs of a double wind maximum starting to begin, but it's so tiny that you can't see it on these graphs. And that would indicate an eyewall replacement cycle. Now we're going to go ahead and take a look at your European ensembles here. These are initializing the system atrociously right now at like 960 millibars, but this is a lot deeper. And you can see a couple of our members here getting fairly close to the Turks and Caicos Islands. So if you're there, you need to continue to watch this closely. Please have your hurricane plans ready. You've had all season to do this, and you may even want to consider having other plans in mind as well, like how you might be able to get out of the island if things get too rough. I'm definitely not a forecast, and I definitely wouldn't be worrying or freaking out or panicking about that just yet, and really probably through this whole duration. But you could see how close this gets to the Bahamas here. Very high wave action along your coastline, and also potentially some damaging wind bursts are possible as well, with some rainfall. This will continue to move on up to your northwest, barely skimming the Outer Banks of North Carolina here on a couple of your ensemble models. Look at how close that gets there. So certainly going to have tropical storm force conditions right offshore, and extraordinarily high surf out there. You need to be very careful if you're in the OBX region. And of course, Bermuda over here, it gets a very close call to some of our ensembles here. Taking it very close to your area. If we back it up a bit, I do expect this to be potentially closer to the Outer Banks than Bermuda, so that is something we need to watch for. And then Atlantic Canada, very close call to you all as well, but still a little bit offshore enough to say that this probably won't bring hurricane impacts to your area just yet. Now for your European operational model, this is not very accurate right now. It initialized absolutely horrifically, but you can see how it does take it a little bit further off to the west. And look at this here. Yeah, the Outer Banks here, definitely seeing tropical storm force conditions along the coastline, maybe even inland just a tad bit. But we have got a Category 3 to a Category 4 hurricane right offshore. This is going on into Thursday morning, so certainly something we need to watch for. Nearly a forecast at this point that it'll be right around this area. And Bermuda is very safe from this model run, so that is some great news, and that blasts off to your north and east. Now, it's important to note that the wind and the rain will not be your main issues. It will be the waves. This is your maximum individual wave height here from your European Wave Watch model. And you can see as Erin comes in, your waves start to get very, very high up there. Look at this. As we head on through into Thursday morning, we could be talking about some individual wave heights over 50 feet along the immediate coastline here. I mean, if you were to extend this bubble out a little bit, you would definitely be seeing up to 50-foot wave heights. So something you really need to watch. Do not go out on the waters. We could see some minor coastal flooding from this as well, maybe even some minor storm surge. Bermuda out here could see wave heights in between 20 to 30 feet, so still quite significant. And as this races off into the east coast here, look at this along Massachusetts here, like Nantucket, could be seeing wave heights between 20 to 30 feet as well. But then, our backside of our system here, when it starts accelerating in this direction, gets a little closer to Bermuda, and our wave heights could accelerate on Friday morning up to 40 feet, maybe even 45 feet. So definitely going to be dangerous out there in the wide open Atlantic. And this continues on through. Now moving on to our GFS ensemble, its initialization is the worst I've ever seen in my entire life. So this is really not to be taken seriously. It is too far east as of now. You still have a little bit of a member right there, right off the coast, but please, I would not trust this at all. This will likely be very incorrect. And then, yeah, a lot of them making landfall in Atlantic Canada. I'm not really buying that just yet. How about your operational model? A little bit better, but still absolutely horrible. It takes it a little far east again, but it does split the difference in between your Outer Banks and Bermuda right here. So this is some good news. If you don't want any impacts except waves, that'll still be a threat, you would be rooting for our GFS model here. Now, we did not take take a look at all your individual environmental parameters on your European model because it didn't do good at its initialization point at a Category 2 hurricane. Womp womp. That is not acceptable. It is a Category 5, or was a Category 5 when that model came out. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at one of our hurricane models, the Halves B model, which is doing an incredible job. I think it initialized it at around 915 millibars, which is exactly what it was earlier. So we're going to take a look at your wind shear here from a different perspective on Weatherbell, and you can see our system down here in a very favorable environment. It is undergoing an eyewall replacement cycle, so that is really keeping it a bit on the weaker side. I mean, not to say a Category 4 is weak, but you get the idea. A big plume of wind shear could impact Erin as we go into Monday here. Look at all of your northerly shear. This is very strong, in between 30 to even 40 knots of wind shear. This could really take your system and weaken it substantially if we're not careful. But if Erin does track further west, it will stay away from the majority of this, which it probably will do, let's be honest. But still 20 knots of wind shear is possible, and that will tilt your vortex, tilt your circulation, and all your warm rising air will be going onto one side of your system rather than your eye. This wind shear continues here, but really relaxes as we go on into Wednesday morning, and then we could be talking about really values in between 10 to maybe 20 knots at the most. That's still a bit, but yeah, not nearly as much as before, and that just kind of does whatever it does. We do have the rest of our model in, so we'll keep looking at it. It hits a much bigger pocket of wind shear going into Thursday, and then poof, there it goes. How about your moisture out ahead of Erin right now? It's in its very tightly bundled moisture pocket here. It was fighting a little bit of dry air, which was not on the models as something to note, but as you can see, there's really no issues with dry air. It stays extremely moist in that particular environment as it continues to march on off to the northeast. And it's just, there's really not much of a doubt in my mind that this could re-intensify at least just a little bit, again, knowing that it'll be further west and in more of a favorable environment. Let's take a closer look at our Halves B model. It did initialize at, 173 miles an hour, which it's not terribly far off, but that is a little bit too high. You can see it continuing on off to your northwest here, taking a pretty close pass here to your Turks and Caicos. They are getting winds upwards of tropical storm force. That's why we have watches. And severe thunderstorms rotating in your outer bands could contain winds up to 50 miles an hour and gusts up to 70 possibly in some areas. So batten down the hatches. It's going to get a little bit wild out there at times. We're just going to have to see what winds up happening. But this does take a sharp northwest curve. Is that going to happen? We really don't know. We think it's going to happen, but our confidence isn't the highest in the world as of yet. But Erin will continue on off. Look at this. This is the newest model run, taking it pretty close to your outer banks. Tropical storm watches could get issued here. So you could see winds of 40 miles an hour, it gusts up to 60. And if we do see, these outer bands make it any closer, we could see isolated gusts upwards of 70 to 80 miles an hour just offshore. Definitely a bit of a change up, isn't it? And then Bermuda isn't even on this map because it's way too far to the west. So something to monitor. This stays as a major hurricane. It does weaken to a Category 2 possibly a little later on, down there in your legend, but this is too far out to say for sure. And then undergoes its extratropical transition. You got your big old sting jet right here, and this goes from a barotrophic system to a baroclinic system real fast. How about your Halves A model? Initializes it at 204 miles an hour. That is not happening right now, nor did it happen at any point today. The highest wind gust was 190, and even that might be a stretch. So take this with a big old grain of salt, because this is going to push much further west. And you could clearly see that here. Yeah, some of your severe thunderstorms containing sustained 50-mile-an-hour winds here, Turks and Caicos, that does seem pretty set in stone, I will note. And this does go on and march off to our northwest. I had to reload the model here. Wow, look at this. hurricane conditions, at least hurricane force gusts, are right offshore here of your Outer Banks. You really need to watch out in places like Orcacoke, maybe Nags Head, North Carolina over there. Definitely going to be a bit of a wild ride. 50 to 60 foot waves possibly crashing on shore and winds of that strength. Definitely going to be a wild one. And even up here, you barely see a tip of Long Island, New York, seeing sustained winds of almost tropical storm force, as well as your wind field just explodes in size because of this thing you're undergoing your extratropical transition. Look at that. And Massachusetts up here as well, going to be a windy one going on through into Thursday and Friday. Now for your H-Wharf model, it does initialize a little bit too intense, but it does keep things fairly far off to the north. This is not something I particularly agree with. And yeah, not much of any impacts here further west, so that's something to note. Now your HMOD model did initialize this at 185 miles an hour, a little too high in my opinion. This takes it on off to the northwest. Turks and Caicos, please prepare for tropical storm conditions. It's inevitable at this point, and we're going to continue through. This does keep it pretty far off to your west, not as far west as your other models. Tropical storm conditions on your OBX. I do expect tropical storm watches to be issued along your Outer Banks. We could potentially see something a little more significant with your westward trends as of late, so something to watch. And then your extratropical transition, just like all the other models show. Now, as the famous saying goes, what about after that, right? We got to look further into our future here, and what do we see in our future is a massive uptick in tropical weather activity. This gets on out of the way and goes crazy and does whoa, wind everywhere. Yeah, out in the open Atlantic goes crazy, right? But after this, we do have to watch for another potential tropical system anywhere within this area. Yep. There is zero confidence as to where this will form. GFS takes it as a Caribbean cruiser like this into the Gulf, and oh my gosh, yeah, we don't want to look at that model run, right? That is a little bit too far out and will instill a lot of fear-mongering, so I will not be showing you that. But then again, look at these members here. Do have a couple major hurricane members like this, here, and here, one in the Gulf. That's something. But it's important to note as we rewind it a bit and look at our pressure, we do have a high pressure system that does form right here, a pretty stout one at that is going to guide things on off to the northwest. But according to the EPS, we do still have that area of weakness, right? Because of Erin that just went through. You have this area here that's a little bit weaker, this pathway of least resistance, but not a forecast. Again, I'm just doing basic analysis here of your future weather models. And with that being said, thank you so much for tuning into today's video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to my little corner of the weather community, share this video with friends and family on social media, and also feel free, I don't really say this too often, to ring the notification bell that's next to the subscribe button so you know the precise minute that I upload, right? You get notified immediately with that information. And with that being said, you all stay extremely weather aware out there. Turks and Caicos, I'm talking about you all. The Outer Banks, I'm especially talking about you all, and maybe even Bermuda, but I don't think it'll go that far east at this point. All right, have a wonderful night, everyone.